Now in this movie I want to answer the question, what is a prism? Now notice the spelling, P-R-I-S-M. What is a prism? Now most people when they think of a prism think of the triangular prism. This type of thing that could be a tent for instance, or in this case a box. Now a prism has one characteristic, and that is that this end shape is the same all the way down its length, right to this end. Not only is it, in this case, triangular, it's also the same size, so that this end is the same size, of course, as this end. It doesn't get smaller or bigger or change as it goes down. It's the same all the way down. Now, this area here, technically, is called the cross-sectional area. And so our cross-sectional area, in this case, is a triangle. If we take the cuboid, the cross-sectional area of this cuboid is a rectangle. It's the same size and the same shape all the way down its length, so this end is exactly the same as this end. Now, many prisms are named after the shape of the end. So in this one, the end here is, as you can see, is a pentagon. So this is called a pentagonal prism. And this one is a hexagon, of course. So this is a hexagonal prism. And I'd just like to emphasise again, it's that same hexagon all the way down, no matter where we cut it. If we take this cross-shaped prism, although it has pieces missing here, it's no problem at all, it's still a prism because it's that cross-sectional area, that same shape, all the way down its length. It doesn't matter how long that is, that could be 100 kilometres long, it would still be a prism. Now, cylinders are prisms, and here I've got rather a large one, a candle, and this one demonstrates something about practical prisms, and that is that sometimes they're not always perfect. For instance, it's a pretty perfect prism from here to here, but then you've got this little lump bit on the end where the wick is. So when you see practical prisms, when you're looking for them in the real world, just ignore little bits like that and just think of the whole shape as it is. So a cylinder is a prism, it's exactly that same shape all the way down. Now, if you take a look at this particular shape here, I'll hold this a bit closer. At first you may think, well, that's not a prism, because if I cut it here, imagine my saw's going through there, I get one shape. If I cut it here, I get a different shape, and here a different shape. But one of the tricks about prisms is you have to try and identify the end. So it's very easy on a shape like that, but with something like this it's rather more difficult. Now what we need is a bit of creative thinking. If you turn this round and look at this end, imagine I've painted that white or whatever. Okay. Now this shape is the same all the way through its length. It's not actually very deep, it's only about 3 centimetres deep, but it's still a prism. It's that shape all the way through. So if I cut it there or there or there, it doesn't matter. It's that same shape. By the way, I've got no idea what this is. I found it in the local garden centre, but I thought, wow, prism. Okay. Now I'd like you to have a look at this picture of a skip, or a dumpster as I believe the Americans call it. If you imagine cutting it from the left side, taking one cut and then moving a little bit to the right and taking another cut and then another and so on, the cross-sectional area will change as you move through. So at first sight you may think that that's not actually a prism. But if you imagine that the side facing us is the end, mathematically the end, you will see it's a trapezium. It has one pair of parallel sides. And then imagine cutting parallel to that, moving away from the camera to the back of the shape. I think you will see then that it will always be that same trapezium all the way through. So a skip is actually a prism too. Now, if you have a look at this road sign, is a road sign a prism? Well, it's triangular, and again, if you cut it starting at the left and moving to the right, or you start at the top and moving down, then you probably won't imagine that it's a prism at all. But let's go back to my triangular prism here. Let's imagine that I cut a little piece off here, and then I cut some off here, and then I cut some off here. So the piece that's left is actually getting shorter and shorter and shorter, until eventually it's only 3 or 4 millimetres thick. That little bit left over will still be a prism, of course, even though it's a very thin prism. So most road signs, almost all road signs of this type, are actually prisms. But again, you have to identify the end of the prism. And in this case, it's actually the triangular face. And if you move through just a few millimetres before you get to the back of the sign, it's the same cross-sectional area all the way through. By the way, talking of triangular prisms, there's something rather odd about this one. Now here I have a pair of my trusty post office scales. These are for weighing letters and parcels. And if I set them to 0 and put my hexagonal prism on there, that weighs 12 grams. If I take my cross-shaped prism and put that on there, that weighs 17 grams. And if I put my trusty triangular prism on there, that weighs 211 grams. So, as I suspected, there is something very odd about this one, so let's have a look inside and see what we can find. Aha! Just as I expected. Inside, there is another prism. This time, covered in nice silver paper. Now, if I just rub the side there, I'm sure you can guess what's inside. What you're thinking, of course, is lots of little prisms. I can see that. Let's open it up and have a look, shall we? Aha. Yes, just as I thought. My favourite chocolate bar. Now, if you look at each of these little, well, what you might think are prisms, you'll see they're actually thicker at the bottom than they are at the top. So if I were to slice my way through them, it wouldn't be the same cross-sectional area all the time. It would be thicker at the bottom than at the top. So they're not actually prisms. So you're going to be very disappointed about that, of course. I, on the other hand, am going to be delicified. My favourite. Oh, do you know, I've waited all day for that.